She has just given birth. Her body is shaking. Her baby is 11 minutes old. Her husband reaches into his bag. He pulls out a manila envelope. He places it on the metal tray. Next to her, IV line. Divorce papers. His mother is standing in the corner, smiling. He believes his wife has nothing. No money, no lawyer, no options. He believes she is too exhausted to fight back. He believes this is the perfect moment to take everything. He is about to make the worst mistake of his life, because the woman in that bed is not who he thinks she is. She has never been who he thinks she is. And the lawyer waiting outside that door is holding a document that will change every single thing Michael Coleman believes about his marriage, his money, and his power. $2 billion. That is the number Michael is about to hear, and it is only the beginning of what he is about to lose. But before that satisfying moment, you need to understand how a quiet woman ended up in this bed, holding her newborn son, with a billionaire's legal shield in her pocket, and how a man who thought he controlled everything discovered he had controlled nothing. This story carries a truth that many women know, but rarely hear spoken out loud. Silence is not weakness. Patience is not surrender. And the people who underestimate you the most are always the ones who never bothered to ask who you really are. If you have ever been dismissed, overlooked, or made to feel like you had no power, this story is your reminder. Preparation is protection. Documentation is armor. And dignity, maintained quietly over years, is the strongest foundation you will ever build. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you that real strength does not need to shout, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. A friend, a sister, a woman who is going through something hard and thinks she is alone. Drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from. We love seeing how these stories travel across different places and different lives. Your words matter to this community more than you know. And if this is your first time here, consider subscribing. We tell stories about quiet strength, legal justice, and women who refuse to be underestimated. New stories arrive every week, and each one carries the same reminder. The delivery room smelled like antiseptic and blood. Jessica Coleman lay in the hospital bed with her newborn son pressed against her chest. The baby had arrived 11 minutes earlier, after 14 hours of labor. He was small and red and screaming, and when the nurses finally placed him against her skin, he quieted instantly, as though he had been waiting for exactly that. Jessica's arms trembled. Her hospital gown was soaked through with sweat. Her hair clung to her forehead in dark streaks. The monitors beside her beeped in steady rhythm, tracking a heart rate that was still elevated, still recovering, still working to keep her conscious. She had never felt so exhausted in her life. She had also never felt so certain that she was exactly where she needed to be. The room was bright. Fluorescent panels hummed overhead. Two nurses moved with practiced calm, recording vitals, adjusting lines, speaking in low, professional tones. Dr. Helen Moore stood near the foot of the bed, reviewing a chart. Her posture relaxed now that the delivery had concluded without complication. Michael Coleman stood to the left of the bed. He had been there for the last 3 hours. Before that, he had been in the hallway on his phone. Before that, he had been late. He wore a dark blazer over a white shirt. His jaw was set in a way that Jessica had learned to recognize years ago. It was the expression he wore when he had already made a decision and was simply waiting for the appropriate moment to announce it. Jessica noticed. She always noticed. Michael reached down beside his chair and lifted a leather bag onto his lap. He unzipped it slowly. The sound was small, but distinct in the post-delivery quiet. He removed a manila envelope, thick and unwrinkled, as though it had been stored with care. He placed it on the metal tray beside Jessica's IV line. The metal made a soft sound against the paper. One of the nurses glanced over, then looked away. Michael straightened. He adjusted his cuffs. He cleared his throat. "Jessica," he said. His voice was calm, measured, the voice of a man delivering a quarterly report. "We need to handle this now." Jessica looked at the envelope. She did not touch it. She looked at Michael. His eyes were steady, rehearsed. She recognized that too. He had practiced this, probably in his car, probably in front of a mirror. From the far wall, Linda Coleman shifted her weight. Michael's mother had arrived at the hospital before Michael had. She had positioned herself near the window, with her arms crossed and her chin lifted, watching the delivery with the detachment of someone supervising a transaction. Now Linda was smiling. It was a small smile, contained. The kind of smile a person allows themselves when they believe the outcome is already decided. Michael continued speaking. He used words like reasonable and fair and necessary. He mentioned terms. He mentioned arrangements. He mentioned a lawyer named Ethan Carter who had drafted everything. "This is best for everyone," Michael said. "I want to keep this simple." Jessica listened. Her son breathed against her chest, tiny and warm. She felt his weight. She felt the steady rhythm of his heartbeat through the thin hospital gown. She felt the ache in her body and the heaviness in her arms and the clarity, sharp and undeniable, in her mind. She did not argue. She did not cry. She did not ask Michael why he had chosen this moment, though she already knew. He had chosen it because he believed she was weak, because he believed exhaustion would make her compliant, because he believed that the woman in this bed had nothing, no resources, no options, no power, and that this envelope would confirm it. Jessica shifted her hold on the baby. She adjusted the blanket around his shoulders. She looked toward the door, then she spoke. One word, quiet, steady, almost gentle. "Daniel." The door opened. It opened immediately, without hesitation, because the man on the other side had been waiting for 3 hours. He had been sitting in a hard plastic chair in the hallway, a slim leather folder on his lap, reading documents he already knew by heart. Daniel Wright stepped into the delivery room the way he entered every room, without ceremony. He was 61 years old. He wore a dark charcoal suit that fit precisely. His expression was composed, professional, entirely unreadable. He did not look at Michael first. He looked at Jessica. He took in her condition. He confirmed she was conscious. He confirmed she was aware. "Are you comfortable?" he asked. "Yes," Jessica replied. Only then did Daniel turn to Michael. He extended no hand. He offered no greeting. He simply spoke. "Mr. Coleman, I am Daniel Wright. I represent your wife." He opened the folder. He placed a document on the metal tray beside the manila envelope. 2 stacks of paper now. Same surface, same size, vastly different weight. Daniel read clearly, without rush, without inflection. The Coleman Family Trust, established 1987. Sole beneficiary, Jessica Ann Coleman, formerly Whitfield. Total assets as of the most recent valuation, $2,100,000,000. All assets are classified as separate and premarital. The trust is irrevocable and excluded from any marital division under the laws of North Carolina. The room went still. Michael stared at the document, then at Daniel, then at Jessica. "That is not possible," he said. Daniel continued as though Michael had not spoken. "The trust also designates exclusive medical decision-making authority and guardianship rights to the beneficiary during and immediately following childbirth. These provisions are active now." The nurses had stopped moving. Dr. Moore stood motionless near the foot of the bed. Linda's smile had vanished. Her arms were still crossed, but her fingers had tightened, gripping her own sleeves. The manila envelope sat on the tray, untouched and already irrelevant. Michael's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at Jessica with an expression she had never seen before. Not anger, not confusion. Something closer to vertigo. The expression of a man who has just discovered that the floor he has been standing on does not exist. "You hid this from me," he said. Jessica met his eyes, calm, clear, no anger, no triumph, just fact. "You never asked." Before this satisfying moment can be understood, before the weight of that trust deed can be fully appreciated, you need to know how it came to this. How a quiet woman ended up in a hospital bed with a newborn on her chest and a billionaire's legal shield in her pocket. How a man who thought he controlled everything discovered he had controlled nothing. This story begins 8 months earlier, on a Tuesday morning, with a bank notification Jessica was never meant to understand. Jessica Whitfield met Michael Coleman at a fundraiser for a children's literacy nonprofit in Charlotte, North Carolina. She was 28. He was 32. The event was held at a rooftop venue downtown, the kind of place where people paid $300 a plate to feel generous for an evening. Jessica had come because she believed in the cause. Michael had come because a colleague told him it was good for networking. They were seated at the same table. Michael spoke first. He always spoke first. He was confident, well-dressed, articulate in the way that men in finance often are, as though every sentence were a closing argument. He talked about deals, he talked about leverage, he talked about the market, with the ease of someone who assumed everyone at the table found the subject as fascinating as he did. Jessica listened. She asked questions that were short and precise. Michael liked that. He interpreted her attention as admiration. He interpreted her silence as agreement. They dated for 18 months before he proposed. During that time, Michael talked often about himself, his work, his plans, his vision for the future. Jessica listened and observed. She learned his patterns, his assumptions, his blind spots. She learned that Michael equated control with competence, that he measured relationships by who deferred to whom, and that he needed on a fundamental level to believe he was the most capable person in any room. She did not correct this belief. She did not see the point. The wedding was held at a country club outside Charlotte. 200 guests. Michael's side was loud and confident. Jessica's side was smaller, quieter, well-dressed in a way that did not demand attention. Michael paid for most of the wedding. He mentioned this at the reception, casually, during a toast that was mostly about himself. The guests laughed politely. Linda Coleman, Michael's mother, approached Jessica at the rehearsal dinner. She was 61 at the time, sharp-featured, and precise in the way of women who had spent decades managing perceptions. She wore a cream-colored dress and a thin gold chain. She looked at Jessica the way one might look at a rental agreement, searching for the fine print. "My son does not settle," Linda said, "so do not give him a reason to reconsider." Jessica met her eyes. She nodded once. She did not smile. At the ceremony, Jessica's father, Gerald Whitfield, shook Michael's hand at the altar. Gerald was 70, retired, deliberately understated. He wore a gray suit that fit perfectly but attracted no attention. He leaned close to Michael and said, "Take care of her." Michael heard a plea from a quiet old man. Gerald meant something else entirely. He meant a warning, the kind that carried weight only in retrospect. Gerald Whitfield had spent 40 years as a trust attorney. He had built one of the most sophisticated generational wealth structures on the East Coast, not for clients, but for his own family. The Whitfield Trust, later reorganized as the Coleman Family Trust upon Jessica's marriage, held assets totaling $2,100,000,000. It was irrevocable, separate, and invisible to anyone who was not actively looking for it. Jessica was the sole beneficiary. She had been since the day she was born. Gerald had taught her one rule above all others. He said it once clearly when she was 16 and never repeated it. Money is only loud when it is insecure. Jessica internalized that rule so completely that it became indistinguishable from her personality. She did not display wealth. She did not reference it. She did not use it to assert status or gain leverage in social situations. She lived modestly, worked as a freelance editor, and transferred money into the household accounts without commentary. Michael never questioned where the transfers came from. He assumed they were modest, consistent with what a freelance editor might earn. He never opened the account statements. He never asked. Jessica did not volunteer the information. She was not hiding. She was being precise. The trust existed independently of her marriage. It was not relevant to the daily mechanics of their life together. And Michael, she understood, would not have processed the information correctly even if she had offered it. He would have felt threatened. He would have recalibrated his behavior in ways that would have made the marriage worse. So she said nothing. And the silence settled into the foundation of their life together, like rebar and concrete, structural, invisible, holding everything in place. The first 2 years of the marriage were uneventful in the way that certain marriages are uneventful. Not because nothing happened, but because nothing was examined. Michael made decisions. Jessica accommodated them. He chose the house, a 4-bedroom colonial in a suburb that signaled success without shouting it. He chose the bank. He chose the financial advisor. He chose which expenses were discussed and which were simply decided. Jessica contributed. She paid for groceries, utilities, small household repairs. She transferred money monthly from the account Michael did not examine. She kept records of everything, not out of suspicion, but out of habit. Her father had taught her that documentation was not paranoia. It was clarity deferred. Linda visited every 2 weeks. She arrived without calling ahead, which she framed as closeness, but which functioned as surveillance. She commented on the cleanliness of the kitchen, the organization of the pantry, the temperature of the house. She spoke about Jessica in the third person while Jessica was in the room. She keeps things simple, Linda would say to Michael. That is good. A man needs calm at home. Jessica poured coffee. She smiled when appropriate. She noticed every word and cataloged it without expression. Michael's confidence grew, not in a visible way, not in a way that announced itself, but in the small, daily accumulations of unchallenged authority. He decided when they ate. He decided when they went out. He decided which friends they saw and which invitations they declined. When Jessica offered an opinion, he listened politely, then did what he had already planned. Jessica adjusted. She did not argue. She did not resent. She understood that Michael was building a version of reality that confirmed his assumptions, and she understood that as long as those assumptions remained intact, the marriage would function. She was not afraid. She was strategic. She was watching the way a person watches weather, noting patterns, anticipating shifts, preparing without alarm. She kept a notebook, not a diary, a record, dates, times, observations, Michael's late nights, his tone shifts, the comments Linda made when she thought Jessica was not listening, the way Michael's voice hardened when he felt questioned, even gently. She did not know what the notebook was for. She only knew that clarity, when it arrived, would require evidence, and evidence required patience. By the time she became pregnant, 2.5 years into the marriage, Jessica had documented over 300 entries. She kept the notebook in a drawer in the small study Michael never entered because it was hers, and he had never been curious about what was hers. That, she would later understand, was the central fact of the entire marriage. Michael Coleman was not curious about his wife. He was certain about her, and certainty, built on assumptions that were never tested, was the most dangerous foundation a person could stand on. The pregnancy changed everything and nothing. It changed the dynamic, the tension, the unspoken expectations that had settled into the walls of their home. It changed the way Michael looked at her, the way Linda spoke to her, the way the future arranged itself in her mind. But it changed nothing about who Jessica was. If anything, it clarified her. Michael was proud of the pregnancy in the way he was proud of most things, publicly and performatively. He announced it to his family before Jessica had finished telling Rachel Simmons, her closest friend since college. He posted about it on social media before the first trimester was complete, against the quiet suggestion Jessica made about waiting. "People need to know," Michael said. "It is good news. Why wait?" Jessica did not argue. She filed the moment away. Linda arrived the following weekend with a binder. She had opinions about hospitals, doctors, delivery methods, nursery colors, and names. She spread the binder across the kitchen table as though presenting a business proposal and talked for 45 minutes without pausing for input. Jessica listened. She nodded at appropriate intervals. She did not mention that she had already chosen her doctor, had already toured the hospital, had already discussed a birth plan with Dr. Helen Moore at Mercy General. Linda did not ask what Jessica had already done. Linda assumed nothing had been done because Linda assumed Jessica did not do things without guidance. As the weeks progressed, Michael's behavior changed in ways that were subtle at first, then less so. He stayed at the office later. He took phone calls in the garage, the car, the backyard, anywhere Jessica was not. His answers to simple questions became shorter. His attention, already intermittent, became scarce. Jessica noticed. She did not confront. She documented. The bank notifications were the first concrete evidence. Jessica had set up alerts on the joint account years earlier, not from suspicion, but from the same impulse that made her keep a notebook. Information was neutral. It became meaningful only in context. The alert showed transfers she did not recognize. Small at first, then larger. Amounts moved out of the joint account and into unfamiliar accounts, then replaced days later from different sources. The pattern was irregular, but consistent enough to suggest intention. She asked Michael about one transfer on a Sunday evening. She kept her tone casual, curious, not accusatory. "There was a transfer last Thursday. 18,000. What was that for?" Michael was on his phone. He did not look up immediately. When he did, his expression was tight. "It is work. Why are you suddenly concerned?" "I was not concerned. I was asking." Michael waved the question away. "You do not need to worry about that." Jessica paused. She poured herself a glass of water. She went to the study. She opened her notebook. She wrote one line, dated and precise. The transfer amount. Michael's response, his tone. She did not feel anger. She felt confirmation. Something she had sensed for months was taking shape, not as suspicion, but as pattern. That night she lay in bed listening to Michael's breathing beside her. One hand rested on her stomach. The baby moved, a slow, insistent pressure against her palm. She thought about the kind of world her child would enter. Not the large, abstract world, the immediate one, the world shaped by the man sleeping next to her and the choices he was making in rooms she could not see. She made no decisions that night. She simply let the information settle. The discovery came 3 weeks later, not through gossip, not through a friend's warning, not through a dramatic confrontation, through a bank notification on a Tuesday afternoon. Jessica was at a baby supply store on the east side of Charlotte. The store was bright and warm, filled with pastel colors and soft music. Women moved between aisles, touching fabrics, comparing strollers, holding tiny socks up to the light. Jessica stood near the back, holding a set of newborn onesies, white with small gray stars. She was thinking about nothing in particular, or maybe about everything, when her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. A bank alert. Joint account activity. $85,000. Transferred to an external account. Recipient listed as V. Harper. Jessica read the notification twice. She looked at the name, V. Harper. She did not recognize it immediately, but her mind worked quickly, connecting the name to fragments she had collected over months. A colleague Michael mentioned casually, a woman at a company event who had smiled a little too long, a name that appeared once in a text notification on Michael's phone that Jessica had seen but not mentioned. Vanessa Harper. The store continued around her. A mother asked a clerk about crib mattresses. A toddler laughed somewhere near the entrance. The music played softly, something with a piano and no words. Jessica set the onesies down on the display table, carefully, without rushing. She walked to the parking lot. She got into her car. She closed the door. She sat for 11 minutes without moving. She did not cry. Crying was not what her body wanted to do. Her body wanted to think. Her mind was already organizing, sorting, prioritizing. The transfer amount, the recipient, the timeline, the pattern of late nights and guarded phone calls, and the distance that had grown so gradually she had almost normalized it. She picked up her phone. She dialed a number she had not called in months, but had never deleted. Daniel Wright answered on the second ring. His voice was calm, as it always was, professional but not cold. Jessica, Daniel, it is time to update everything. There was a pause, not of surprise. Daniel Wright did not surprise easily. It was the pause of a man shifting from standby to active. I will have the documents ready by Thursday, he said. Good. Is there anything immediate? Anything urgent? Jessica looked through the windshield at the baby store. A woman walked out carrying 2 shopping bags, one in each hand, a toddler on her hip. Not yet, Jessica said. But there will be. She ended the call. She drove home. She cooked dinner. She set the table for 2. When Michael arrived at 7:45, late again, she smiled and asked about his day. He said it was long. He said there was pressure at work. He said he was tired. She served him dinner. They ate in silence. He checked his phone under the table 3 times. She counted. Vanessa Harper had been at Michael's firm for 2 years. She was 28 years old, sharp-featured, deliberate in the way she presented herself. She dressed carefully. She spoke with precision. She positioned herself in rooms the way chess pieces position on a board, always adjacent to power, never quite touching it, always ready. The affair had begun 11 months earlier. Michael would later describe it to himself as physical, temporary, a release valve for the pressure he felt at work and at home. He told himself it had nothing to do with Jessica. He told himself it was contained. Vanessa told herself something different. Vanessa told herself it was a beginning. She had studied Michael the way Jessica had studied Michael, but from the opposite direction. Where Jessica observed to protect, Vanessa observed to acquire. She learned his insecurities. She learned what made him feel powerful. She learned that praise delivered at the right moment could redirect his attention like a spotlight. She was patient. She was calculating. And she was not content to remain invisible. 2 weeks after the $85,000 transfer, Vanessa made her move. A text message arrived on Jessica's phone at 9:14 on a Wednesday night. It appeared to be sent by accident, a misdirected message, a slip of the thumb. But Jessica had lived long enough with Michael to understand that very few things in the orbit of ambitious people happened by accident. The message was a photograph, a selfie, Vanessa in a hotel bathroom, hair wet, wearing a man's white dress shirt. Jessica recognized the shirt. She had ironed it 2 weeks earlier. Below the photo, a caption, "Last night was everything. See you Thursday." Followed by a kissing emoji, sent to Jessica's number, not Michael's. Jessica looked at the message for a long time. She studied the background of the photograph. She noted the hotel. She noted the shirt. She noted the timestamp. Then she screenshotted the message. She emailed it to herself. She forwarded it to Daniel Wright with a single line. "Please add to file." She deleted nothing from her phone. She did not block the number. She did not reply. She did not confront Michael. She did not call Vanessa. She went to bed. She placed her hand on her stomach. The baby kicked once, then settled. The next morning, she went to her prenatal appointment. She answered every question calmly. Dr. Moore noted that her blood pressure was slightly elevated, but within normal range. "Are you managing your stress?" Dr. Moore asked. "Yes," Jessica said. "I am managing everything." That evening, Michael came home at 8:15. He kissed her forehead. "Long day," he said. "I am sure," Jessica replied. She cooked dinner. They ate. He checked his phone under the table. She counted. 4 times. Jessica washed the dishes alone. She wiped down the counters. She turned off the kitchen light. In the study, she opened her notebook. She wrote the date, the transfer amount, the text message, and 3 words that would later prove more valuable than anything else she had documented. She wrote, "He does not know," and she was right. Michael did not know what Jessica had discovered. He did not know what she had prepared. He did not know that the quiet woman he had married, the woman he had dismissed as passive, the woman he believed had no resources and no options, was already 3 steps ahead of him. He would not find out until the delivery room, and by then, it would be far too late. The hospital corridor was bright and cold at 3 in the morning. Jessica drove herself. Michael was traveling. That was the word he used, traveling, as though distance were an occupation rather than an excuse. He had left 2 days earlier for what he described as a conference in Atlanta. Jessica had nodded. She had not asked which conference. She had not asked which hotel. She had learned that questions invited lies, and lies required energy she no longer wished to spend on him. The cramps began at 2:47 a.m. Sharp, low, insistent. She was 8 months pregnant, too early for labor, too late to ignore. She dressed in the dark. She picked up her hospital bag, the one she had packed 2 weeks earlier because she believed in being ready for things that were not supposed to happen yet. She drove 12 minutes to Mercy General with both hands on the wheel and her jaw clenched so tight, her teeth ached. The emergency department was quiet. A nurse met her at the entrance with a wheelchair. Jessica declined it. She walked to the intake desk, under her own power, because walking was something she could still control. Dr. Helen Moore was on call. She arrived within 20 minutes. Already reviewing the file, a resident had started. She examined Jessica quickly and thoroughly. Blood pressure elevated. Protein markers concerning. The baby's heartbeat showed irregularities, dips that recovered, but should not have been dipping at all. "We need to monitor you," Dr. Moore said. Her voice was calm but lacked its usual warmth. That absence told Jessica more than the words did. "Is the baby in danger?" Jessica asked. "We are watching closely. The next few hours will tell us more." Jessica lay in the monitoring room. The machines around her beeped and hummed. A blood pressure cuff inflated on her arm every 15 minutes. A belt across her abdomen tracked the baby's heartbeat in a continuous line. that rose and fell on a screen she could not stop watching. She called Michael. The phone rang 4 times and went to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. She sent a text message. I am at the hospital. The baby might be in danger. Please call. She set the phone on the bed beside her and waited. 40 minutes passed. The room was cold. The lights buzzed faintly somewhere down the hall. A door opened and closed. Jessica lay on her side with one hand on her stomach, feeling the baby move, counting the movements the way Dr. Moore had taught her. Each one was a tiny reassurance. Each pause between them was a tiny terror. Rachel Simmons arrived at 3:32 a.m. She had received Jessica's text and driven 18 minutes from her apartment without stopping to change out of her pajamas. She wore a coat over flannel pants and sneakers she had grabbed without tying. She found Jessica in the monitoring room. Jessica was sitting upright, one hand on her stomach, face absolutely still. Not calm, not peaceful. Still the way water is still before it freezes. Jess, what happened? Cramps. Blood pressure. The heartbeat is irregular. Rachel pulled a chair beside the bed. She sat down. She did not ask about Michael yet. She could see the phone on the bed, screen dark, waiting for a call that had not come. Where is he? Rachel asked after a moment. Atlanta, conference. Rachel's jaw tightened. She did not press. She reached over and placed her hand on Jessica's arm. They sat together in the buzzing silence of the monitoring room while the machines tracked a heartbeat that was too small to be uncertain and too important to be ignored. At 5:47 a.m., Michael called back. Jessica answered immediately. The first thing she heard was background noise, music, clinking glasses, the murmur of a crowded room, and a woman's laugh, bright and careless, somewhere close to the phone. Hey, sorry, Michael said. I was in a meeting. What is going on? Jessica's voice came out flat. She did not raise it. She did not lower it. She delivered the information the way a news anchor delivers a headline. I am being monitored for preeclampsia. The baby's heartbeat was irregular. I have been here since 3 a.m. A pause. She heard him shift. She heard the background noise dim slightly, as though he had stepped away from wherever he was. Is it serious? They do not know yet. Okay, I will try to come by later. I have got meetings until noon. The sentence landed in Jessica's chest like a stone dropped into still water. Meetings until noon. His wife was in a hospital bed with a compromised pregnancy, and his first calculation was about his schedule. She did not argue. She did not plead. Okay, she said. Keep me posted. He hung up. Jessica stared at her phone. The screen dimmed, then went dark. Rachel stared at Jessica. She had heard enough through the silence to understand. Jess, don't, Jessica whispered. Not right now. She placed her hand back on her stomach. She closed her eyes. The baby moved once, then twice, then settled into a rhythm that felt like agreement. Jessica made a promise then, not aloud, not in words that anyone could hear, but in the space between heartbeats, in the quiet room, in the small hours of a morning when she was alone with her unborn child and the full weight of her understanding. I will protect you, whatever it costs me, whatever I have to lose first. The monitoring stabilized by mid-morning. The heartbeat returned to normal range. The blood pressure dropped to a level that concerned Dr. Moore less. They would continue to watch. They would schedule additional appointments. Jessica would need to reduce stress, rest more, monitor herself. Jessica nodded at each instruction. She filed each detail. Michael arrived at 2:14 p.m. He brought flowers, yellow tulips, the kind that gas stations sell in cellophane wrapping. He also brought an apology that was casual and practiced, the kind of apology that expected forgiveness as a formality. "I am sorry I could not get here sooner. Things were crazy." Jessica looked at the flowers. She looked at Michael. He was freshly showered. His shirt was different from the one he had been wearing in the photo Vanessa had sent her 3 weeks earlier, but his cologne was the same. She recognized it because it was not his usual cologne. It was something newer, something selected for someone else's preference. "Thank you," Jessica said. She took the flowers. She set them on the side table without arranging them. Michael sat beside her for 40 minutes. He checked his phone 11 times. He asked about the baby twice. He asked about Jessica's condition once. He talked about traffic for 5 minutes. When he left, he kissed her forehead. She did not lean into it. That evening, alone in the study at home, Jessica called Daniel Wright. "The documents need to be finalized," she said. "All of them. They are nearly ready. Signatures by Friday." "Good. Is there anything else?" Jessica paused. Through the window, the sun was setting. Orange light moved slowly across the floor of the study, touching the edge of the desk where her notebook lay open. "He did not come," she said. "When I called from the hospital, he did not come." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Then the timeline is appropriate. Yes. I will have everything delivered by courier. Signatures will be handled discreetly." "Thank you, Daniel." "Jessica, you are doing the right thing." She did not respond to that. She was not sure doing the right thing was supposed to feel this heavy. When the documents arrived 2 days later, Jessica signed them in the study with the door closed. Trust protections updated. Beneficiary designations confirmed. Medical proxies finalized. Powers of attorney executed. She did not reread what she already understood. She did not celebrate. She did not feel powerful. She felt aligned, her actions matching the reality she was observing, quietly, precisely, completely. She placed the signed documents in a drawer she had prepared. She closed it. She went to the kitchen and made herself tea. Michael came home at 9. He said the conference had been productive. He said he had missed her. He said the flowers on the side table looked nice. Jessica smiled. "They do," she said. She poured him coffee. She sat across from him at the kitchen table. He talked about work. She listened. She had been listening for years. The difference now was that she knew exactly what she was listening for, and she knew exactly what she would do when the time came. The time was coming faster than either of them realized. Michael Coleman had spent 3 weeks preparing for a moment he believed would last 5 minutes. He imagined it cleanly. The baby born, the room calm. Jessica exhausted, emotional, compliant. He would place the envelope on the tray. He would explain the terms. She would cry, perhaps. She might ask questions. He would answer them patiently. Linda would stand nearby as a witness. The nurses would pretend not to notice. And then it would be done. Simple, decisive, controlled. The idea had been Linda's originally, not the divorce itself, but the timing. She had planted it months earlier during one of her kitchen table sessions. The ones where she sat with Michael, while Jessica rested in another room and offered opinions framed as wisdom. "Some women change after the baby comes," Linda said. "They get demanding. They forget their place. You should act first, Michael, before she has time to think." Michael had dismissed it initially, but the idea settled into his mind the way mold settles into damp wood, slowly, invisibly, and then all at once. He consulted Ethan Carter under the guise of hypothetical questions. What would happen if things did not work out? How would assets be divided? What leverage existed? Ethan answered confidently. Based on what Michael described, the situation was straightforward. Most assets in Michael's name, Jessica's income modest. No prenuptial agreement. The law, Ethan explained, rewarded preparation. Michael took that as permission. He told Vanessa the plan on a Wednesday night in her apartment downtown. They were lying in bed. The city lights filtered through thin curtains. Vanessa listened with her head on his chest, tracing circles on his shoulder. "After it is done," she said, "we can finally stop hiding." Michael liked the sound of that. He liked the way Vanessa made the future sound inevitable, as though it were simply waiting for him to claim it. What Michael did not consider was that Jessica had been preparing longer. She had been preparing since before the $85,000 transfer. She had been preparing since the first time she noticed that Michael's confidence required her silence to function. She had been preparing, in some fundamental way, since the day her father handed her a folder of documents and said, "This is yours. Protect it. Do not let anyone make you feel like you need to explain it." Daniel Wright arranged to be at the hospital on the day of the delivery. He did not ask Jessica for permission. He informed her, the way a general informs a commander, that reinforcements are in position. "I will be in the hallway," he said. "You will not see me unless you need me. If you need me, say my name. I will hear it." Jessica told only one other person, Rachel Simmons. She called her the night before the scheduled induction and spoke carefully. "Daniel will be at the hospital, in the hallway. Michael does not know." Rachel paused. "You think he is going to do something?" "I think he has been planning something. I do not know exactly what, but I know he believes I am unprepared." "And you are prepared?" "Yes." "Then I will be there too. In the waiting room, close enough." "Thank you, Rach." "You do not need to thank me. Just let me know when to be angry." Jessica almost smiled. Almost. Labor began at 4 a.m. on a Tuesday, 2 weeks early. The contractions came sharp and close together, insistent in a way that left no room for negotiation. Jessica woke Michael. He groaned, checked his watch, and muttered something about a meeting he would need to cancel. He dressed slowly. He seemed annoyed by the timing, as though the baby had chosen an inconvenient slot in his calendar. At Mercy General, the process unfolded with efficient professionalism. Dr. Moore reviewed charts. Nurses prepped the room. Monitors were attached. Michael paced in the corner, checking his phone. He stepped into the hallway twice to take call. Linda arrived within the hour. She entered the room as though she owned it, inspecting the equipment, questioning the nurse about Jessica's dilation, suggesting adjustments to the lighting. Jessica labored for 14 hours. The pain was immense, rolling through her body in waves that demanded total surrender. She did not scream. She did not beg. She followed Dr. Moore's instructions. She breathed, she focused, she held on. Michael watched from the far side of the room. His presence was physical but not emotional. He was there the way furniture is there, occupying space without contributing warmth. At 6:22 p.m., the baby arrived. A boy, 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Healthy. Lungs strong enough to fill the room with a cry that made 2 nurses smile. Jessica felt the weight transfer from inside her to her arms. The baby was placed against her chest, warm and impossibly small. His cry softened to a whimper, then silence. He was listening to her heartbeat. She was listening to his. The room exhaled. Relief spread among the staff. Dr. Moore smiled. Then Jessica felt the shift. She did not see Michael reach for his bag. She did not see him unzip it. She heard the sound. The manila envelope landing on the metal tray. The soft, deliberate contact of paper against steel. "Jessica, we need to handle this now." She looked at the envelope. She looked at Michael. His jaw was set. His posture was straight. He had been waiting for this, planning for this, rehearsing for this. He began speaking. Terms, conditions, arrangements. He used the word reasonable. He used the word fair. He mentioned Ethan Carter's name as though invoking a legal authority that would make everything official. Linda smiled from the wall. The nurses froze. Dr. Moore's expression shifted from warmth to assessment. Jessica listened. She held her baby. She breathed. She did not argue. She did not cry. She did not plead. She waited until Michael finished his rehearsed speech. She waited until the room was still. She waited until every eye was on her, expecting collapse, expecting surrender, expecting the reaction Michael had imagined in the mirror of his car. Then she spoke. "Daniel." The door opened. Daniel Wright had been sitting in a hard plastic chair for 3 hours. He had read the trust documents 4 times. He had reviewed every scenario. He had anticipated objections, counter-arguments, and emotional escalation. He had prepared for all of it. What he had not needed to prepare for was chaos. Because when Jessica Coleman said his name, there was no chaos. There was only precision. He entered the room. He looked at Jessica first. He confirmed her awareness, her consent, her readiness. Then he turned to Michael, and the room changed. "Mr. Coleman, I am Daniel Wright. I represent your wife." He placed the trust deed on the tray beside the manila envelope. He read the first paragraph aloud. He did not rush. He did not emphasize. He let the words do what words do when they carry legal weight. He let them land. $2,100,000,000. Michael's face moved through 5 expressions in 3 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, calculation, fear, and finally something that looked for just a moment like recognition. The recognition of a man realizing that every assumption he had ever made about his wife was wrong. "That is not possible," he said. It was not an argument. It was a reflex. The same reflex a person has when they touch something hot. Not a decision to deny. Just the body's first attempt to protect itself from information that burns. Daniel continued. "Guardianship provisions, medical authority, custody protections activated by childbirth. Ethan Carter arrived breathless and already recalibrating. He read the documents, his face drained of color. "Michael, this changes everything." Michael looked at Jessica. She met his eyes. "You hid this from me." "You never asked." The envelope sat on the tray, untouched, irrelevant. A prop in a play that had just been rewritten. Linda's smile was gone. Her hands gripped her own elbows. For the first time, she looked uncertain. A woman who had walked into a room believing she understood the power structure and discovering she had not even been in the right building. Dr. Moore stepped forward. "My patient needs rest. This discussion is over." Michael opened his mouth, then closed it. Daniel gathered his documents. He nodded to Jessica. He left the room without ceremony, the same way he had entered. Michael stared at the tray. 2 stacks of paper. One he had brought. One that had been waiting for him. He reached for his envelope, then stopped. He pulled his hand back as though the paper might cut him. He left without taking it. The envelope remained on the tray. A nurse removed it later and placed it in a bin marked for unclaimed items. No one asked about it. That night, the room was dark and quiet. Jessica lay with her son on her chest. The monitors beeped softly. Rachel arrived with soup that Jessica barely touched. She sat beside the bed. "You did it, Jess. It is over." Jessica closed her eyes. For the first time in months, the tension in her shoulders eased. She felt something she had not allowed herself to feel in a long time. Hope. She let herself believe the worst had passed. She let herself imagine the future as something she could shape rather than survive. She was wrong. The worst was not over. It was reorganizing. It was regrouping. It was sitting in a car in the hospital parking lot with a phone pressed to its ear, already planning the next attack. And Jessica, for all her preparation, was about to learn that some enemies do not retreat when they lose. They escalate. 72 hours after the trust deed was read in the delivery room, Michael Coleman sat in Ethan Carter's office, on the 14th floor of a glass building downtown. The view from the window showed Charlotte's skyline in late afternoon light. Michael was not looking at the view. He was looking at the wall. "Tell me there is something," he said. Ethan sat across from him, hands flat on the desk. His posture had changed since the hospital. The confidence that had carried their early meetings was gone, replaced by the cautious tension of a man recalculating. "The trust is solid, Michael. It predates the marriage. The assets were never commingled. Under North Carolina law, they are entirely separate. I know that. Tell me something else." Ethan paused. "There are other angles, but they are aggressive. I want aggressive. Then you need to understand the risks." Michael leaned forward. "I just had a lawyer I have never seen before read a $2 billion trust deed in a room where I was trying to serve divorce papers. My mother was there. My colleagues will find out. My reputation is already damaged. I am past caring about risks." Ethan nodded slowly. He opened a folder on his desk. What happened next was not Michael's plan alone. It was a collaboration, a three-person assault designed not to win, but to overwhelm. Linda Coleman made the first move. She filed an emergency petition with the family court 48 hours after the delivery. The petition claimed that Jessica Coleman displayed signs of severe postpartum psychosis and posed a potential danger to her newborn son. Attached was a written statement from a nurse at Mercy General, not Rachel Simmons, but a woman named Christine Powell, who had been on shift during the delivery. The statement described Jessica as emotionally flat and detached during and immediately following labor. It noted that Jessica did not cry during delivery, that she showed limited emotional response to the newborn, and that she appeared to prioritize a legal confrontation over bonding with her child. The description was technically accurate and completely misleading. Jessica had been calm because she was disciplined. She had been composed because she had prepared. But, on paper, stripped of context, her composure looked clinical. And clinical, in the language of family court, could be made to look dangerous. Michael made the second move the following day. Through Ethan, he filed a motion for a mandatory psychiatric evaluation of Jessica and a temporary geographic restriction, preventing her from leaving the county with the baby until the evaluation was complete. The motion cited Linda's petition, Christine Powell's statement, and added a new claim that Jessica's concealment of the trust demonstrated a pattern of deception, inconsistent with stable parental judgment. The court reviewed the motions within 24 hours. Judge Robert Ellison, presiding over the emergency docket, granted both. A psychiatric evaluation was ordered. A geographic restriction was imposed. Jessica could keep the baby. She could not leave the county. The order arrived at the hospital by courier. Jessica was still in her recovery room, scheduled for discharge the following morning. The baby slept beside her in a clear plastic bassinet. The room was quiet. The worst, she had believed, was behind her. She opened the envelope. She read the first paragraph, then the second, then the third. A social worker appeared at her door 20 minutes later. A woman named Karen Mills, with kind eyes and a clipboard. She explained the evaluation process. 3 sessions: psychological assessment, interview with a licensed psychiatrist, results to be filed with the court. Jessica listened. She answered Karen's questions calmly. She provided dates and contacts. She did not cry. She did not protest. When Karen left, Jessica sat in the bed and stared at the court order. The words blurred and refocused. She read the phrase, temporary geographic restriction, 3 times. She could hold her son. She could feed him. She could name him. But she could not leave. She was free in every way except the one that mattered. Rachel arrived 30 minutes later. She found Jessica sitting upright, the court order in her lap, her son asleep beside her. Jessica's face was still, not the composed stillness she wore in public, something raw. "What is this?" Rachel said, picking up the paper. Jessica's voice was quiet, flattened. "They are saying I am unstable. They are restricting me to the county." Rachel read the order, her face changed. "Can Daniel fight this?" "He is already on it, but the evaluation takes 2 weeks. 2 weeks? 14 days of being watched, assessed, questioned. 14 days of proving I am not crazy for being calm while my husband tried to divorce me in a delivery room." Rachel sat on the edge of the bed. She reached for Jessica's hand. Jessica did not pull away, but she did not squeeze back either. She was somewhere else, somewhere deep inside the machinery of her own endurance, trying to find the gear that kept everything turning. "I did everything right," Jessica whispered, "and they are still winning." Rachel held her hand tighter. "They are not winning. They are panicking. There is a difference." Jessica wanted to believe that. She looked at her son. He was sleeping with his mouth slightly open, one tiny fist curled against the mattress. He did not know about court orders. He did not know about geographic restrictions. He did not know that the world he had been born into was already trying to separate him from the only person who had protected him from the very beginning. "I am not leaving him," Jessica said. "Whatever they do, however long this takes, I am not leaving him." "I know," Rachel said, "and we are going to make sure you never have to." The evaluation began 5 days later. Dr. Patricia Langston conducted the sessions at her office in a low brick building near the university. She was 54, experienced, and careful in the way that people who deal regularly in other people's pain learn to be careful. The first session lasted 90 minutes. Dr. Langston asked about Jessica's childhood, her parents, her education, her marriage. Jessica answered honestly. She did not embellish. She did not perform. She described events as they had happened in order with dates and details. Dr. Langston listened. She took notes. She asked follow-up questions that were sharp, but not unkind. "You discovered your husband's affair during your pregnancy. How did that make you feel?" Jessica paused. "It confirmed what I already suspected. I felt clarity more than grief." "And when he presented the divorce papers in the delivery room?" "I felt nothing I had not already prepared for." Some might describe that level of composure as unusual. Some might. I would describe it as necessary. The second session focused on the trust, on Jessica's decision not to disclose it to Michael, on her relationship with Daniel Wright and her family's legal history. Dr. Langston probed carefully, looking for signs of deception, manipulation, pathological secrecy. She found none. What she found was a woman who had been raised to value discretion, who had married a man who valued control, and who had spent years navigating the gap between the two without losing herself. The third session was shorter. Dr. Langston interviewed Rachel as a character reference and reviewed Jessica's medical records from the pregnancy. She reviewed the delivery notes. She reviewed the bank records Jessica had provided through Daniel. 12 days after the evaluation began, Dr. Langston submitted her report to the court. The conclusion was unambiguous. No evidence of postpartum psychosis. No evidence of mental instability. No evidence of impaired parental judgment. No risk to the child. The geographic restriction was lifted immediately. Daniel filed the results with a motion to dismiss Linda's emergency petition. The motion was granted within 48 hours. Jessica walked out of Daniel's office into the afternoon sunlight. The baby was in his car seat. The air was warm. The parking lot was ordinary, a slab of asphalt bordered by oak trees losing their leaves. She stood beside her car. She tilted her face toward the sun. She breathed. Okay, she said quietly. Okay, now it is really over. It was not over, but for one brief, radiant moment, standing in a parking lot, with her son and the autumn sun on her face, Jessica allowed herself to believe that it was. She held the feeling carefully, like something fragile. It lasted 3 days. The first catastrophe arrived on a Monday. Jessica was at a grocery store 6 miles from her house. The baby was in his car seat, fitted into the top of the shopping cart. She had diapers, formula, a bag of oranges, a box of oatmeal, and 2 cans of soup. The total came to $47.12. She inserted her debit card. The machine beeped. Declined. She tried again. Declined. The cashier, a woman in her 50s, with reading glasses on a chain, looked at Jessica with the practiced neutrality of someone who had seen this before. You want to try another card? Jessica tried the credit card linked to the same joint account. Declined. The line behind her grew. A man in a baseball cap shifted his weight. A woman with a toddler on her hip looked at her phone. Jessica felt heat rise in her face. Not embarrassment, recognition. She knew immediately what had happened. She did not need to check her phone. She did not need to call the bank. She stepped out of line. She left the cart by the register. She walked to the parking lot with her baby and sat in the car. She called Daniel. I cannot access any money. The accounts are frozen. Daniel's voice was steady. Michael filed a fraud claim yesterday. He is alleging you concealed community assets throughout the marriage. The claim triggered an automatic freeze on all joint accounts pending investigation. How long? Could be weeks. The investigation has to run its course. Jessica looked at the baby. He was awake, staring at the roof of the car with wide, unfocused eyes. He made a small sound, not a cry, a question. Daniel, I have a trust worth $2 billion and I cannot buy diapers. I know. We are working on an emergency motion to release personal funds, but the joint accounts are separate from the trust, and the freeze applies to the joint accounts specifically. How long for the motion? 5 to 7 business days. Jessica closed her eyes. 5 to 7 days. A week of not being able to buy formula for her baby because her husband had weaponized the banking system. She called Rachel. Can you lend me $300? Rachel did not ask why. She did not hesitate. The money was in Jessica's personal account within 4 minutes. That night, Jessica heated formula she had purchased with borrowed money. She stood in the kitchen of a house that was technically still hers, a house she had helped pay for, a house filled with things she had chosen and maintained, and she could not afford the groceries on the counter without her best friend's charity. The absurdity of it should have been funny. It was not funny. It was the specific kind of cruelty that only systems could produce. The kind where a man could spend $340,000 on his mistress and then freeze his wife's ability to buy oranges. Jessica gripped the counter until her knuckles turned white. She stood there for a long time. Then she heated the formula, fed her son, and put him to bed. She sat in the study afterward. She did not open her notebook. She did not call anyone. She sat in the dark and listened to the house settle around her. 3 days later, the second catastrophe arrived. Jessica was sitting in the nursery at 2 in the morning, feeding the baby. The room was lit by a single lamp. The house was silent. Her phone was beside her on the armrest of the rocking chair, face down because she had learned that nothing good arrived on a phone screen after midnight. It buzzed anyway. Rachel's name. Jessica answered. Do not go on Instagram right now. Rachel's voice was tight, the kind of tight that meant she was working hard to stay calm. I already saw it. When? 20 minutes ago. I was feeding him, and I looked. Silence on the line. Then Rachel said, Is it real? Jessica looked at her son. He had finished eating and was staring at her with the unfocused intensity that only newborns have, the expression of a person who has not yet learned to distinguish between one face and another, but knows with absolute certainty that this particular face means safety. "I do not know if it is real," Jessica said. "And right now, that does not matter. What matters is that everyone who sees it will believe it is." Vanessa Harper had posted a photograph on Instagram 3 hours earlier. A profile shot, soft lighting, hand on her stomach. The caption read, "New chapter, new life, blessed beyond words." Below the caption was a sonogram image. It was dated. The initials on the image could easily be read as MC and VH. The implication was unmistakable. Vanessa Harper was telling the world she was pregnant with Michael Coleman's child. The post spread quickly. It was shared by mutual acquaintances, screenshotted into group chats, forwarded to people Jessica knew from the neighborhood, from the prenatal classes, from the life she had built carefully and quietly in Charlotte. Jessica did not know if Vanessa was actually pregnant. She did not know if Michael knew about the post. She did not know if it was real or strategic or both. What she knew was this: she had given birth 3 weeks earlier to a baby boy she loved more than she had ever loved anything, and now a woman who had slept with her husband was publicly announcing a pregnancy that, real or not, was designed to replace her. She set the phone down. She looked at her son. He had fallen asleep, milk-drunk and heavy against her arm. His breathing was slow and even. She felt something crack inside her. Not break, crack. The hairline fracture of a woman who had prepared for financial attacks and legal ambushes and public humiliation, but had not prepared for the specific cruelty of being erased while she was still holding her baby. She did not cry. She placed her son in his crib. She stood at the window. The street outside was empty. She did not sleep that night. The third catastrophe came 1 week later. Linda Coleman appeared on a podcast. The show was called Mothers Who Stand, a regional program that featured interviews with women navigating family conflict. The host was sympathetic. The audience was predominantly female, predominantly over 40, predominantly inclined to believe a crying grandmother. Linda cried on the air. The tears were practiced. The pauses were measured. The narrative was surgical. "My son's wife hid a fortune from him," Linda said. $2 billion. She trapped him in a marriage based on lies, and now she is using that money to steal my grandchild from our family. She called Jessica calculating. She called the trust weaponized wealth. She described Michael as a good man driven to desperation by a woman who controlled everything from the shadows. "He just wanted to be a father," Linda said, her voice breaking on cue. "And she took that from him." The episode was shared 40,000 times in 3 days. The comment sections became battlefields. Strangers who had never met Jessica formed opinions about her character based on a 60-minute interview with a woman who had helped plan a delivery room ambush. Women Jessica had never seen wrote essays about how hiding money from your husband was the same as lying. Men wrote that the trust proved Jessica had always intended to leave. Armchair psychologists diagnosed her with narcissistic personality disorder based on Linda's description of her composure. One comment received 1,200 likes. It read, "She is a predator in victim's clothing." Jessica read it at 4 a.m, sitting in the nursery with the blue light of her phone illuminating the walls. The baby was asleep in his crib. The house was silent. She set the phone face down on the dresser. She walked to the window. The street was dark and empty. The houses across the street were dark. The world was sleeping. "I did not do anything wrong," she whispered. The house did not answer. The street did not answer. The night absorbed her words and gave nothing back. She stood there for a long time. Rachel found Jessica in the nursery the next morning. She let herself in with the spare key Jessica had given her months earlier. She called out from the front door. No answer. She called again from the hallway. Nothing. She climbed the stairs with a growing tightness in her chest. The nursery door was open. Jessica sat in the rocking chair, her son in her arms. She was not rocking. She was not humming. She was sitting completely still, staring at the wall opposite, as though the wall contained an answer she could not quite read. The room smelled like baby powder and exhaustion. "Jess." Rachel's voice was careful, controlled. "When did you last eat?" No answer. "Jess." Jessica's voice came out thin, scraped, like something that had been used too many times without rest. "They're going to keep going. Michael, Linda, Vanessa. They are not going to stop. They are going to keep filing petitions and freezing accounts and going on podcasts and posting pictures until they either take him from me or I break. And I do not know which one comes first." Rachel knelt beside the rocking chair. She placed a hand on Jessica's arm. She felt the tension in it, the muscles locked, the body holding itself together through sheer, mechanical will. "Look at me," Rachel said. Jessica looked. Her eyes were red but dry. She had passed beyond crying into something quieter and more frightening. Not anger, not grief, and resignation. The slow, heavy settling of a woman who had spent months fighting and was beginning to wonder if fighting was enough. "You are not breaking," Rachel said. Her voice was firm, not harsh, firm the way foundations are firm, the way the ground is firm beneath a building that refuses to fall. "You are tired, you are hurt, you are being attacked from 3 directions by people who do not deserve you. But you are still here. You are still holding him, and you are still the strongest person I have ever known." Jessica's chin trembled. She pressed her lips together. She looked down at her son. He was awake now, watching her face with that expression newborns have, the one that does not yet distinguish between looking and loving. "I am so scared, Rach." Her voice cracked. "I am so scared they will take him." Rachel squeezed her arm, "Then let us make sure they cannot." They sat together in the nursery for 20 minutes. Rachel made tea. Jessica drank half of it. The baby fell asleep again. The morning light moved across the floor in slow increments. At 10:15, Jessica picked up her phone. She called Daniel Wright. "I need to end this," she said. Her voice was different now, not strong in the way people usually mean when they say someone sounds strong. Steady in the way a bridge is steady, holding weight not because it is unaffected, but because it was built to hold exactly this much. Not next month, not next week. Now. Daniel paused. 2 seconds. 3. Then we file for an emergency hearing, and we bring everything. Everything. I mean everything, Jessica. The bank records, the text messages, the transfer receipts, the fabricated texts Linda submitted, Vanessa's post, the voicemail. "The voicemail," Jessica repeated. "Yes." She closed her eyes. She had almost forgotten about the voicemail. Or rather, she had filed it away with everything else. One more piece of evidence in a collection that had grown so large it sometimes felt like its own kind of burden. Linda had called Jessica's phone 3 weeks earlier, late at night, probably after several glasses of wine. She had intended, perhaps, to leave a brief message. Instead, she had spoken for nearly 2 minutes, apparently unaware that the voicemail was recording. The message was not pleasant. It was not measured. It was Linda without the filter she wore in public, Linda without the practiced tears, Linda speaking to a woman she believed could not fight back. You think that money makes you better than us? Michael will take everything, and that baby will call Vanessa mommy before the year is out. You are nothing, Jessica. You have always been nothing. Jessica had listened to it once. She had saved it. She had not listened to it again. We bring everything, Jessica told Daniel. Every piece of it. I will file the motion today. We should have a hearing within 2 weeks. Make it sooner. I will try. Jessica ended the call. She set the phone down. She looked at Rachel. It ends in court, she said. Rachel nodded. Good. Jessica stood from the rocking chair. She carried her son to the crib and laid him down with the careful precision of someone handling the most important thing in the world. She adjusted his blanket. She touched his forehead gently. Then she walked to the study. She opened the drawer. She removed the notebook, the files, the documents that Daniel had provided over the months. She spread them across the desk. She looked at the assembled evidence of her marriage. Dates, times, transfers, screenshots, legal filings, court orders, medical records, a voicemail from a woman who had called her nothing. Jessica sat down. She picked up the notebook. She turned to the first page, dated years earlier. She read her own handwriting, neat and precise. She had been preparing for this moment since before she knew it would come. Every note, every date, every observation. They had been building towards something she could not see at the time, but could see clearly now. Not revenge, not victory, resolution. She closed the notebook. She placed it on top of the stack. She stood. For the first time in weeks, she felt something that was not fear. It was not hope either. It was something older and more durable than both. It was readiness. Charlotte Family Court. Courtroom 4, B937, on a Wednesday morning. Judge Margaret Sullivan presided from an elevated bench at the front of the room. She was 58, silver-haired, precise in the way that judges become precise after decades of watching people lie to them. She wore no expression. She consulted no papers as the parties entered. She simply watched. On the left side of the courtroom, Michael Coleman sat beside Ethan Carter. Michael wore a suit that was slightly too formal for a family court proceeding, as though he had dressed for an audience that was not present. His posture was rigid. His hands were flat on the table in front of him. Behind them in the gallery, Linda Coleman sat in the second row. She wore a dark blue dress and pearl earrings. She had prepared her face the way she prepared everything, carefully, with attention to how it would be perceived. 2 rows behind Linda, Vanessa Harper sat alone. She wore minimal makeup and kept her eyes forward. She was trying to appear uninvolved, a spectator rather than a participant. It was not working. On the right side, Jessica Coleman sat beside Daniel Wright. She wore a simple navy dress. No jewelry, no embellishment. Her folder rested in her lap. Her hands were still. Behind her, Rachel Simmons sat close enough to touch Jessica's shoulder. She did. The courtroom was not crowded. There were no cameras, no reporters. Family court proceedings in North Carolina were not public spectacles. They were administrative procedures, quiet engines of consequence that did their work without an audience. Judge Sullivan called the proceedings to order. Daniel stood. Your Honor, we are here to resolve multiple outstanding motions and to present evidence relevant to custody, financial standing, and the conduct of the petitioner and associated parties. Proceed, Judge Sullivan said. Daniel opened his folder. He did not rush. He placed each document on the table with the deliberate care of a man who understood that the order of information mattered as much as its content. The first piece of evidence concerned the text messages Linda Coleman had submitted as part of her grandparents' rights petition A series of text messages, allegedly sent by Jessica. The messages threatened to disappear with the baby. They contained language that was aggressive, unstable, and inconsistent with anything Jessica had ever written. Daniel presented the original messages, then he presented the forensic analysis. A digital forensics expert examined the metadata of these messages, Daniel said. The messages were not generated from Mrs. Coleman's phone. They were created on a device registered to an address in downtown Charlotte. He paused. The address is the residence of Vanessa Harper. The courtroom went quiet. Linda's face drained of color. She gripped the bench in front of her with both hands. Her mouth opened. Judge Sullivan looked at her sharply. Mrs. Coleman, you are not a party to this proceeding. You will remain silent. Linda closed her mouth. Her hands trembled against the wood. Michael turned and looked at Vanessa. She was staring at the floor. She did not look up. Daniel continued without pause. The second piece of evidence concerned the bank records. He presented 18 months of transaction history from the joint account. The record showed a pattern of transfers. Large amounts moved to external accounts and replaced days later from different sources. But they also showed something else. $340,000, Daniel said, was transferred directly from the joint account to a personal account held by Vanessa Harper. These transfers occurred over a period of 11 months. They coincide with the period during which Mr. Coleman was engaged in an extramarital relationship with Miss Harper. He laid the records on the table. These were not business expenses. No business filings were made during the relevant period. The funds were used for rent, travel, dining, and personal purchases. Ethan Carter closed his folder. He did not object. He looked at Michael with an expression that combined professional obligation with personal disgust. Michael spoke, his voice low, barely controlled. Those were loans for a business project. Daniel did not respond to Michael. He addressed the judge. The record speaks for itself, Your Honor. Vanessa shifted in her seat. She stood abruptly and moved toward the aisle. Miss Harper, Judge Sullivan said, her voice flat and absolute, you will remain seated. A court officer stepped toward the aisle. Vanessa sat back down. Her face had gone red and white in alternating patches. The third piece of evidence concerned the pregnancy. Daniel presented Vanessa's social media post, the photograph, the sonogram, the caption. He laid them beside a medical affidavit obtained through subpoena from Vanessa's own gynecologist. Vanessa Harper was not pregnant at the time of this post, Daniel said. She had not been pregnant during any relevant period. The sonogram image was sourced from a publicly available stock medical website. The courtroom murmured. Judge Sullivan raised a hand. The murmur stopped. Michael turned slowly toward Vanessa. His expression shifted through stages that the room could track, but no one could fully read. Surprise, confusion, and then something harder and colder. The recognition that the woman he had chosen over his wife had been lying to him with the same fluency he had used to lie to Jessica. Vanessa did not look at him. She stared at the floor. Her lips were pressed together so tightly they had lost their color. The fourth piece of evidence was the voicemail. Daniel produced a phone. He requested permission to play a recording. Judge Sullivan granted it. Linda's voice filled the courtroom. Not the composed, tearful voice she had used on the podcast. Not the careful, strategic voice she used in public. The real voice. The voice that emerged after midnight, after too much wine, when she believed no one was recording. You think that money makes you better than us? Michael will take everything, and that baby will call Vanessa Mommy before the year is out. You are nothing, Jessica. You have always been nothing. The recording ended. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Michael turned to his mother. He looked at her the way a person looks at a building that has just revealed a crack in its foundation. Not with anger, Not with surprise, with the slow, devastating understanding that the structure he had trusted his entire life was not what he had believed it to be. Linda met his eyes for 1 second, then she looked away. Something between them broke, not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. The kind of break that does not heal because neither party will acknowledge it existed. The fifth and final piece of evidence was the trust deed. Daniel presented the original documents. The forensic accounting report was attached. Zero commingling of assets across the entire marriage. The trust predated the marriage by 23 years. Every dollar was accounted for. Every structure was intact. Daniel stated the number once. $2.1 billion. Separate. Premarital. Irrevocable. Judge Sullivan reviewed the documents for a long moment. She turned pages. She read. She set them down. The courtroom waited. Judge Sullivan spoke. Her voice was measured, carrying the weight of authority that did not need volume. This court has reviewed all evidence presented. The following orders are entered. Full sole custody of the minor child is awarded to Jessica Coleman. Michael Coleman is granted supervised visitation 2 hours, twice monthly, at a court-monitored facility. Michael stared at the table. His hands had not moved from their flat position. Michael Coleman is ordered to provide full restitution of $340,000 in unauthorized transfers from the joint marital account, plus all legal fees incurred by the respondent. Ethan made a note. His pen moved mechanically. The emergency petition filed by Linda Coleman for grandparents' rights is dismissed with prejudice. Additional filing restrictions are imposed. Mrs. Coleman is prohibited from filing further motions in this matter without prior court approval. Linda sat rigid in the gallery. Her pearls caught the light. Vanessa Harper is referred to the district attorney for investigation of evidence fabrication and fraud. The matter of the falsified text messages and the fraudulent pregnancy claim will be handled through appropriate channels. Vanessa's breathing was audible. Short, shallow, the sound of someone realizing that what began as ambition had become a criminal investigation. Restraining orders are issued against Michael Coleman, Linda Coleman, and Vanessa Harper. No contact with Jessica Coleman or the minor child outside of court-supervised channels. The fraud claim filed against Jessica Coleman is dismissed. The freeze on all joint accounts is lifted effective immediately. Judge Sullivan paused. She removed her glasses. She looked directly at Michael. Mr. Coleman, you initiated divorce proceedings against your wife in a delivery room, minutes after she gave birth to your child. You did this believing she had no resources, no support, no recourse. Every assumption you made was wrong. This court does not reward that kind of miscalculation. She replaced her glasses. Court is adjourned. The room exhaled. Jessica sat still. She did not smile. She did not cry. She did not look at Michael. She did not look at Linda. She did not look at Vanessa. She placed one hand flat on the folder in her lap. The folder she had never needed to open. The folder that contained the notebook she had kept for years. The evidence of a marriage observed in real time by a woman who had been underestimated every single day of it. Behind her, Rachel leaned forward and placed a hand on her shoulder. Jessica reached up without turning and held it. They stayed like that for a moment. Two women in a courtroom, connected by a decade of friendship and the unspoken understanding that some victories do not feel like victories. They feel like exhaling after holding your breath for years. Then Jessica stood. She gathered her folder. She walked out of the courtroom without looking back. Daniel walked beside her. He did not speak. He did not need to. In the hallway, the light was different, softer. The windows let in afternoon sun that fell in long rectangles across the floor. Jessica stopped at the end of the corridor. She stood in one of those rectangles of light and closed her eyes. She felt the warmth on her face. She felt the weight leave her chest. Not all of it, but enough. "It is done," Daniel said. Jessica opened her eyes. "Yes. You should go home. Rest." "Hold your son," she nodded. "I will." "Jessica?" She looked at him. "You did exactly what you needed to do. Nothing more, nothing less. That is rare." She held his gaze for a moment. Then she turned and walked toward the exit. Michael Coleman lost his job on a Thursday. The firm's internal audit had concluded 3 weeks after the court ruling. The unauthorized transfers, the undisclosed conflicts, the professional conduct that had attracted legal scrutiny, all of it converged into a 2-page letter from the managing partner, delivered to Michael's desk at 9 in the morning. He read it in his office. He did not argue. He packed his personal items into a single cardboard box and left the building without speaking to anyone. His real estate license was suspended 2 weeks later, pending regulatory review. Clients who had trusted him with significant investments pulled their contracts. Colleagues who had admired his confidence stopped returning his calls. The network he had built, the relationships that had seemed permanent, revealed themselves to be conditional, dependent on the very thing Michael had lost, the appearance of control. He found an apartment 20 minutes from the house he had once managed. 1 bedroom, beige walls, carpet that was thin enough to feel the concrete beneath. The kitchen had a window that faced a parking lot. He stood at that window, often, in the early mornings, holding coffee he had made in a machine that was too small for the counter. His first supervised visit with his son took place at a county monitoring facility. The room had fluorescent lights, plastic chairs, and a play area with toys that had been cleaned too many times. A court supervisor sat in the corner, observing. Michael held his son for 45 minutes. The boy was 3 months old. He did not recognize his father. He did not cry, but he did not settle either. He squirmed and turned his face toward the door, looking for something or someone he could not name. Michael brought a stuffed bear. He had bought it at a gas station on the drive over because he had not thought to buy it sooner. He held the bear near his son's face. The boy looked at it briefly, then away. When the visit ended, Michael returned the boy to the supervisor. He walked to his car. He sat in the driver's seat. He did not start the engine. He cried, not loudly, not for long. The kind of crying that happens when a person finally stops performing and has nothing left but the truth of what they have done. No one saw. Linda Coleman's world contracted at the same pace. The church group she had led for 11 years, the one that met on Wednesday nights and organized charity drives at Christmas, asked her to step down. The request was polite. The implication was not. The podcast episode had resurfaced after the court ruling became known through the community. People who had listened sympathetically the first time now listened with different ears. The tears that had seemed genuine now seemed rehearsed. The narrative that had seemed compelling now seemed calculated. The charity board followed. A formal letter, gentle language, firm conclusion. Old friends stopped calling. Not all at once, one by one, the way lights go out in a building at the end of the day. Lunches were canceled. Invitations were not extended. The phone rang less. Then barely at all. Linda moved to a smaller house in a different county. She called Michael once a week, then once every 2 weeks. Their conversations grew shorter. She offered advice he did not want. She asked questions he did not answer. Eventually, he stopped picking up reliably. She wrote a letter to Jessica. 3 pages, handwritten. She mailed it on a Tuesday. Jessica received it. She read it once, sitting at the kitchen table, while her son played on a blanket on the floor. The letter contained explanations. It contained justifications. It contained carefully worded approximations of regret that stopped short of apology. It said many things. None of them were, "I am sorry." Jessica folded the letter. She placed it in a drawer. She did not respond. Linda never met her grandson. She never requested visitation. She never called Jessica again. The silence between them was permanent, not because it was enforced, but because there was nothing left to say. Vanessa Harper's exit was the quietest of the three. The district attorney reviewed the evidence Daniel had submitted, the fabricated text messages, the metadata showing they were created on Vanessa's device, the fake pregnancy post, the stock sonogram image, the pattern of deception that extended beyond personal ambition into criminal conduct. Charges were filed. Evidence tampering. Fraud. The proceedings were not public, but they did not need to be. Background checks carried them forward into every interview Vanessa attended, every application she submitted, every attempt she made to start over. The firm terminated her before the arraignment. Her colleagues, the ones who had admired her sharpness, her ambition, her ability to navigate complex professional environments, learned the details through office channels. They did not reach out. Her social media went dark. The curated Instagram that had showcased her life, the carefully lit photos, the captions about growth and gratitude and new beginnings, disappeared overnight. The $340,000 Michael had transferred to her was clawed back through the court order. She paid it in installments. The installments would continue for years. The last anyone heard, Vanessa was working at a retail store in a town 40 miles from Charlotte. A small place with wide aisles and fluorescent lights. She told a coworker she was starting over. She did not explain from what. The coworker did not ask. Jessica Coleman did not give interviews. She did not post on social media. She did not respond to the podcast. She did not address the strangers who had formed opinions about her life based on a 60-minute recording of a woman who had helped plan a delivery room ambush. She did not feel the need to explain herself to people who had never been interested in understanding. She moved, not far, a quieter neighborhood on the west side of Charlotte. The house was modest, 2 bedrooms, a yard with a fence, a kitchen that got morning light. It was smaller than the colonial she had shared with Michael, and it felt larger because every room in it belonged to her. She planted a garden in the backyard, tomatoes, basil, marigolds along the fence. She did not have a talent for gardening, but she had patience, and patience, she had learned, was the foundation of most things worth growing. She joined a pottery class on Saturday mornings at a studio near the university. She was not good at it. The bowls she made were lopsided. The mugs leaked. But there was something in the process, the wet clay between her fingers, the wheel turning, the slow shaping of something from nothing, that felt necessary. Like practice for a skill she could not name. She read to her son every night. Sometimes the same book 3 times in a row because he liked the sound of her voice more than the words. She learned to distinguish between his cries. The one that meant hunger, the one that meant discomfort, the one that meant nothing was wrong, but everything was new and overwhelming, and he needed to be held. She held him. Often. Longer than necessary. Because necessary was not the right measure for love. Rachel visited on Sundays. She brought coffee and pastries from a bakery they had liked since college. They sat on the porch while the boy played in the yard, grabbing at grass, examining sticks with the seriousness of a scientist. They talked about small things, Rachel's job, a movie one of them had seen, a recipe that had failed. They did not talk about Michael often. When they did, it was briefly, factually, without heat. He belonged to a different chapter. The pages had turned. Daniel Wright sent his final message on a Tuesday evening, 6 months after the ruling. One line. All matters concluded. The trust is secure. Jessica read it once. She set her phone on the kitchen counter. She finished washing the dishes. She dried her hands. She turned off the kitchen light. She did not feel relief. Relief implied the presence of a threat that had been removed. What she felt was alignment. Her life matching her values. Her actions matching her intention. The steady, quiet sense that everything she had built was still standing, not because it had never been tested, but because it had been tested and held. On a Saturday afternoon in early October, Jessica took her son to the park near their house. The leaves were turning, amber and gold, with streaks of red that caught the late afternoon sun and held it like stained glass. The air was cool, but not cold, the kind of autumn air that smelled like earth and change and the slow, patient work of seasons. Her son sat on a blanket on the grass. He was 10 months old now. He could sit up on his own. He could grab things with both hands. He could make sounds that were not quite words, but were clearly attempts at communication, small experiments in voice and volume that delighted him. He grabbed a fistful of grass and looked at it with profound concentration. Then he looked at Jessica and made a sound that might have been a laugh. She smiled. She sat on a bench nearby. Jeans, a sweater, no makeup, no performance. The park was quiet. A few joggers on the path, a couple walking a dog, an older man sitting on a bench across the lawn, reading a newspaper. A young woman sat down on the other end of Jessica's bench. She was maybe 27, dark hair pulled back, a jacket that was slightly too thin for the weather. She was crying quietly, not sobbing, not making a scene, the controlled, suppressed crying of someone who did not want to be noticed. She was turning a wedding ring around and around on her finger, slowly, mechanically, the way a person turns a ring when they are deciding whether to keep wearing it. Jessica watched her for a moment. She did not stare. She did not make it obvious. She simply noticed, the way she had always noticed, quietly, completely, without intrusion. She did not ask what was wrong. She did not offer advice. She did not say, "I understand," or "I have been there," because she knew that those words, however well-intentioned, could feel like trespass to someone in the middle of private pain. Instead, she reached into her bag. She removed a small white card, business card, simple, unadorned. Daniel Wright, attorney at law, a phone number, an address. She placed the card gently on the bench between them. Then she stood. She picked up her son. She folded the blanket. She placed it over her arm. She walked away. The young woman looked down. She saw the card. She picked it up. She read it. She looked at Jessica's back as she moved down the path, unhurried, upright, steady, a woman carrying a child and nothing else that did not belong to her. The young woman held the card for a long time. Then she put it in her pocket. Jessica did not turn around. She did not look back. She walked down the path with her son in her arms. The trees arched overhead, their leaves catching the last of the afternoon light. The air was cool on her face. Her son made a small sound against her shoulder, content, warm, unburdened by the weight of stories that were not his to carry. She thought briefly about the delivery room, not with pain, not with anger, with the clear, unflinching perspective that distance provides. She thought about the envelope on the metal tray. She thought about Michael's face. She thought about Linda's smile. She thought about the moment she said Daniel's name, and the door opened, and the room changed. She thought about all the moments that had led to that one. The notebook, the bank notifications, The text message from Vanessa. The night in the emergency room. The court orders, the frozen accounts. The podcast. The comments from strangers. The night in the nursery when she told Rachel she was scared. All of it. Every piece. Every moment. And she understood something she had not been able to articulate before. Not during the crisis. Not during the court proceedings. Not during the long, slow months of rebuilding. Only now, walking through a park on a Saturday in October with her son asleep against her shoulder. She understood that strength was not the absence of fear. It was not the suppression of pain. It was not composure performed for an audience or dignity maintained for the sake of appearances. Strength was the decision to prepare when preparation seemed unnecessary. To document when documentation seemed paranoid. To trust systems when systems seemed cold. To hold steady when everything and everyone expected you to break. Strength was saying one word in a delivery room and watching the door open. Strength was walking out of a courtroom without looking back. Strength was placing a business card on a bench for a stranger without saying a word. Jessica reached the edge of the park. The path opened onto a sidewalk. The street beyond was quiet. The houses were lit with warm yellow light. Somewhere nearby, someone was cooking dinner. The smell of garlic and bread drifted through the evening air. She shifted her son against her shoulder. He stirred, then settled. His breathing was slow and deep, the breathing of a child who did not yet know the difference between safety and everything else, because safety was all he had ever known. Jessica walked home. The front door was unlocked. She stepped inside. The house was warm. The kitchen light was on. She set her son in his high chair. She washed her hands. She began preparing dinner. She did not think about Michael. She did not think about Linda. She did not think about Vanessa or Ethan or the judge or the courtroom or the podcast or the 40,000 shares or the 1,200 likes on a comment that called her a predator. She thought about dinner. She thought about bath time. She thought about the book she would read to her son before bed, the one with the rabbit and the moon, the one he liked to hear 3 times. She thought about tomorrow. The sun set. The kitchen, filled with golden light, then amber, then the soft gray of early evening. Jessica moved through the space with the ease of someone who had finally stopped bracing for impact. The house was quiet. The world outside was quiet. The story, the long and difficult and painful story that had begun in a delivery room with an envelope on a metal tray, was over. Not because someone had won, not because someone had lost, but because Jessica Coleman had decided long before anyone tested her that she would not be reduced by the assumptions of people who had never bothered to ask who she really was. She had prepared. She had waited. She had allowed the truth to speak. And when it spoke, it did not need to shout. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.